I'd like to thank everybody today for coming to this presentation. I really do appreciate it. The speech I'm going to give is something I've really been kind of wanting to give for a while now. It's something I've really thought about in my head for a while, and I've really wanted to put it into an outline and express it. My background is as a chemist, so I have a tendency to look at everything through sort of a scientific eye. And one of the things I wanted to do was, through a scientific eye, prove that God exists through the lens of science. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain that God does exist, but I'm not going to say who He is. That's for everybody else to interpret and see how they see fit to do. Some people want to call God God. Some people want to call God Allah. Some people may want to think of God as little aliens. That's their own business. My objective in this speech is to present the facts and to show that God does exist. In 1953, there were two scientists, Francis Crick and James Watson, who actually discovered what the structure of DNA looked like. We all know that nowadays the double helix model. Francis Crick stated, as an honest man, armed with all the knowledge available to us now, can only state that in some sense the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle. So many are the conditions which would have been satisfied to get it going. And that's what Crick said back in 1981. Another gentleman by the name of Sir Fred Hoyle, who was an astronomer and mathematician, proposed that the odds of such a molecule forming on their own would be on the order of 1 to 10 to the 40,000 power, and he said that was the same probability of that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and coming out and making a fully assembled 747. So I think that we can all agree that DNA possibly forming on its own without any sort of help or intervention is probably very minuscule. I'm going to propose that we look at DNA through another perspective. I am a major in cybersecurity, and I do have a tendency to look at things through sort of a computer science way of looking at items. If you look at the basic building blocks of DNA, you find that there are basically 4 compounds. Adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine, or scientists like to refer to them as A, C, G, and T. Now, if you listen to a lot of scientists, they'll call DNA the genetic code. Well, one thing about code is you can interchange it with the word program. So you can say not only genetic code, but genetic program. And as a computer person, when you go to turn a computer on, you realize that the computer doesn't just start up on its own without somebody having to have written the software. So therefore, you cannot have a program without a programmer. I thought that was something that, just looking at it through my way of science and computer science, was just something that I thought was very interesting to note. The second perspective I want to look at DNA through, now granted I said my background was in chemistry. It's actually textile chemistry. And so when I play with yarn and everything, things like that, if you look at yarn, it's not one strand. It's many strands woven together upon themselves. If you look at a model of DNA, it's many strands woven in upon themselves. And I found it interesting that in Psalms 139, verse 13, it says, "For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb." If you translate that from the complete Jewish version of the Bible, or complete Jewish Bible, it translates says, "For you fashioned my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb." I find it interesting that we think of DNA as something that's very complex, very unique, and God looks at it as yarn, so to speak. But I thought that was just a little side note I thought was very interesting to bring up. Another thing, we've talked about DNA, one of the smallest things on the planet, very small. We're now going to go for the very largest thing, the universe. We all remember Albert Einstein. theory of relativity. He explained how everything was relative to one another, matter, energy, light, speed, gravity, all that. In the early 1900s, Albert Einstein proposed that the universe was static, meaning it did not expand, it did not contract, and that it always was. Today, modern science has agreed, for the most part, now there are still a few holdouts here and there, but for the most part, the universe is not static, it is expanding. Meaning tomorrow it will be bigger than what it is today. And the next day it will be bigger, and the next day it will be bigger. Let's go in reverse. The universe 4.5 billion years ago, when you could hold it in the palm of your hand. Science today says, yeah, it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually all the matter of the universe could fit in the size of an atom today. You have to always go back and ask yourself, where did that atom come from? That is the one question scientists cannot answer. Where did it come from? I also found it interesting that on TV, on December 20th, the History Channel is going to be having a special called God in the Universe. I thought I would never see this in my life. But they're actually going to sit down with scientists and try to debate whether or not there is a God, because they cannot figure out where that first little bit of matter came from. I thought that was very interesting. In conclusion, like I said, we've looked at the existence of God from both big and small perspectives. We've tried to look at the existence of God through the eyes of science, and I think I've presented a case in which there is a reasonable conclusion that, yes, there is a God, whatever you wish to call him, there is a God, that some sort of intelligence was responsible for us being here. And with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for listening to my presentation. Thank you.